Hey everyone, welcome to the second of Meridian's Tackling Zero webinars. I'm Lachlan Forsyth, Meridian's Media and Content Manager, former journalist, and somehow I've ended up as Meridian's webinar host also. Tackling Zero is where we offer Meridian's insights on topical sustainability issues. It's a chance to share insight with others in the field and to answer any questions that people may have. Over the last 2 or 3 months, there's been a really large focus on electricity generation and the desire to see more renewable energy projects being built. Now, that's great for energy security, but what does that mean for the environment, the economy, local employment, and for communities? Well, to discuss those things and lots of others, I'm joined by Frew, Meridian's Head of Sustainability, and Lloyd Clark, Meridian's Environmental and Sustainability Design Manager. We'll get right into it shortly, but firstly, just a bit of housekeeping. We do encourage any questions you may have, and we're going to set aside a bit of time at the end of the webinar to answer those. You just need to drop your questions there into the Q&A box at the top of your screen. We'll keep an eye across them and then do our best to cover everything off at the end. Lloyd, we're going to start with you and we're going to begin with the basics. You started with Meridian on the Harapaki project. For those who aren't familiar with it, can you tell us a little bit about that project and what you were able to achieve there?
You're Lachlan and everybody else. Thank you very much for having me on this guest webinar. So the Harapaki project is a wind farm project in Napier, 41 turbines, New Zealand's second largest wind farm, 176 megawatts, that we've built and finished over the last 3 years, fully commissioned in the last couple of months. In terms of what we've done, from a sustainability perspective, that is, obviously. Now, I know I promised not to throw too many numbers at you, but I'm afraid I'm going to throw a few at you now, because it's hard to not look at those numbers when you're talking about sustainability and what we've achieved. So, we've just been compiling those numbers now, actually, on Harapaki, now that we've officially finished from a construction perspective and handed over to the generation team. So these numbers are quite new off the team that collate them. So first of all, 89% waste diverted from landfill over the 3 years that we ran Harapaki, which is pretty astounding effort, especially when you consider COVID and the weather and the cyclones that we had. 15 to 20,000 tons of carbon savings. We verified over 10,000 of those. We're still working on verifying the rest, but it's a pretty significant carbon saving. We really drove local employment and spend to the tune of 47% and over $100 million. Really significant work on cultural inclusivity and on the cultural front in general. Water resilience through our own pond, which saved millions of truck movements and saved 8 million New Zealand dollars. We generally had a very high level of sustainability across the project, including a sustainability management plan and SMP that guided us day to day. And we connected 100% of GHG data from ourselves and contractors that was actually used by Victoria University recently to show a 6-month energy payback and 1.5-year GHG payback.
Lloyd, I've been to Harapaki and it is a really impressive project, and those numbers really help add a bit of context to that. It's for those who haven't seen it, it's a massive undertaking. I think, Lloyd, the wider team can be really proud of what was achieved there. Tina, I want to take a slightly broader approach to this with you. Why is this work important to Meridian, and what is the ultimate objective here?
Kia ora, Lachlan. So I guess at a simple level, we think this work is really important because it's just about doing the right thing, and quite frankly, it's what the world needs. So it's so important that actually our company strategy is anchored all around climate action. So we know that there are some really material contributions that we can make. So we've got a couple of big priorities. So those range from growing renewable energy generation, helping customers decarbonise, and then managing our own emissions along the way. So projects that Lloyd's just spoken about, so the Harapaki wind farm, we've got another one up north in Ruakaka looking at a solar and battery site. So these types of projects are really focused on that priority of growing new renewable energy generation capacity and flexibility. But what we really know is that those sustainability practices that go on during the construction side of things are super important, because how we go about those projects really matters. So I guess just stepping back for a moment to kind of put this in context, last decade there wasn't really kind of major kind of sector growth, and therefore the projects that we're talking about today weren't kind of underway kind of at this scale. So the whole sector is now in this like really important growth phase of trying to decarbonise New Zealand. So basically our construction activity is significantly increased. So, projects like this, to some of the examples Lloyd was sharing, can have like really big impacts from employment to emissions to waste. And so standing back, like we're really absolutely committed to delivering these like really significant net good projects. And we definitely want to make sure that we're sort of optimizing those sustainability outcomes and how we go about delivering those, just because the scale is so significant. So that's kind of the big why.
Lloyd, Tina mentioned Harapaki there, moving into Ruakaka. How much are we learning from each project as they are completed, and how is it then informing the subsequent projects?
Yeah, lots is the simple answer. We have a very extensive learnings session at the end of each project, and Harapaki has been a great learning curve, and we have learned so much from it. And then through our learnings process at the end of the project, we've been able to document that and then take it to our next project, so that the Ruakaka Best Battery project is a significant step up in sustainability performance. And then the other projects, it's great to have a pipeline that Meridian has. So, we take it on to the next project again. So now the likes of Tereho Repowering project and the Ruakaka Solar projects are taking those learnings and taking another step up as well. It is helped by the fact that every project has a initiatives and learnings register, and we document those learnings constantly as we go through the project. So when you get to the end, it's not about looking back over 3 years and trying to recap. We're constantly documenting them.
Tina, I know that we started with big picture stuff. I know that was my fault there, but I'd really like to drill down to some of the more specific outcomes that you might have noticed over the recent years that have really stuck with you. I'm thinking things around maybe it's local communities or recycling. What are some things that really stuck with you?
So as a theme, I think I've been really impressed about, when a really clear priority and focus is put on sustainability, there are a lot of really creative and project unique initiatives that come up, and really from those that are actually close to the work at hand. So an example, speaking to the Harapaki wind farm that Lloyd was sort of talking to before, something that I thought was very creative was some work that we did with one of our suppliers, actually redesigning the roading network on that site. So there was about 25 odd kilometres of roading, which helps transport people and equipment sort of around that site. And so when they had a look at like how they might build that to essentially minimise earth movements, like literally trucking dirt around that has kind of associated diesel burn, they were able to basically avoid like thousands of tons of earth movement. So I think things like that are an example of something really unique that the team came up with. And I think behind the scenes in those numbers that Lloyd mentioned, so I think on that project it's north of 15,000 tonnes of emissions that we've avoided. There's actually kind of an aggregation of a bunch of like really creative initiatives that have kind of added up to that figure. So I think that's one thing, is unlocking the knowledge and creativity of those actually close to the work who have kind of the ideas about what might practically work. I think another thing, as simple as it is the power of like really deliberate storytelling. So I think that Lloyd and the team have done a really great job at kind of communicating the learnings and impacts of these projects with others. I think I've definitely seen evidence of how it helps others learn and grow their knowledge and capability. We're actually really specific on it and have measures on this, because this kind of stuff doesn't happen by accident. I've also seen it kind of inspire people to think about how they might proactively apply sustainability in their work. So yeah, I think that purposeful storytelling has helped have knowledge transfer and learnings across projects, but also I think even between teams and Meridian and between organisations outside of Meridian as well. So yeah, I think the creativity and the power of purposeful storytelling have really stuck with me, and I've seen some pretty cool things kind of being done over the years. So that's what stood out.
Lloyd, a lot of the work we do is on very big sites. We've touched on Harapaki, that's massive. The Ruakaka battery site, much smaller site. So do the same sort of principles or the same sort of achievements that you've had on the bigger sites still apply to those smaller ones?
It's a slight bit of tinkering, but the principles are the same, and the process is the same. And we have a very robust structure within Meridian. And we start off with our sustainability infrastructure framework, and that guides us. And we follow the same process, whether it's a wind farm or a solar or a battery project. And from there, you change according to the assessments that you do at the early stage. We start off with the materiality assessments that highlights our key concerns and the foundations to our project. And from there, we build our SMP, and that's probably where you diverge off a bit more, say, on a battery compared to a wind farm. But it's part of the process.
What's the end game? Is this simply about Meridian meeting Meridian's KPIs, or is there also a chance to show a bit of leadership here? When you look at what has been achieved by us, what would you hope we'll start to see across industry as the industry approaches more construction projects?
So in answer to your first two questions, it's both. KPIs are very important on a day-to-day basis when you're sitting in the project. I was based on the ground at Harapaki for 2 years, and that's what helps drive your project. It's a target for you to work towards and then to report against from a performance perspective. Sometimes people do rely on that a bit too much, and they look at the numbers. It's much more than that. It's about what's happening on the ground, and there's so much more that we could talk about that isn't connected to those KPIs at Harapaki. But from our perspective, we made a commitment, and we do make a commitment to act as a leader within the sector, within the energy and the construction sector across the country, and to upskill locally. We really drive to use local employment and local suppliers, but we accept that in regional locations, that means that we're often guiding and upskilling.
I'm going to be coming back to Tina in a moment, but right at the moment, I just wanted to remind everyone, if you do have any questions, feel free to drop them in as we go using the Q&A box at the top. And we're going to take around about 10 minutes at the end just to cover off any questions that you may have. So Tina, coming back to you, I want to talk about mana whenua and the importance of those relationships with mana whenua in this work. Can you just speak to that for us a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I would say that at Meridian, we're on a cultural journey to kind of uplift how we engage and show up in Aotearoa. So not just unique to our generation sites, to our new generation sites, but across our kind of wider business. We've got a lot of relationships with iwi. And I guess as we're going about these new projects, we're looking to make sure that we connect with them to kind of learn about their unique kind of aspirations and think about it through, I guess, the whole of life. So not just in the development phase or the construction phase, but we're kind of about in their communities for a long period of time. So we're wanting to kind of have a constant point of connection there. So I think kind of working with them to identify the unique initiatives that are kind of relevant to their part of the world, whether that relates to training, environmental partnerships, or scholarships and work opportunities. So those are some of the things we're doing. And at a very practical level at these sites, one of the ways we're doing this includes having cultural monitors that have a physical presence on this site. And so these are people from the local mana whenua in that region. And basically, we found that they've been really insightful at helping us make sure we understand their priorities. They've given us kind of on-the-ground cultural guidance and kind of education that have kind of helped inform how that land is developed. So it's really important to us, and we are kind of on that journey and looking to just make sure we do our best to kind of understand their aspirations at a local level and kind of apply that to our projects. So really important.
Lloyd, let's stick with the local theme here. What contribution does this work make to local communities around where you are constructing these projects?
Yeah, I'd say, Lachlan, it's not about contributing per se. I know that's the way that a lot of people look at it, but it's about becoming part of the community. And that's what we strove to do at Harapaki was, I, like many of the team, lived locally and we were based local. We were the community. So, we made ourselves part of the wider community and also the immediate community, attending events with family, barbecues, sports days, school events, etc. Just becoming part of the community first and foremost. And that's when you really build that relationship and get to understand what's key to them. And that's what we had. Over the 3 years I was involved, we built up a really close relationship, and then you understand what are they looking for. And the community around Harapaki was largely a farming community. So through conversations, you realise that the type of things that they might be looking for, And then we look at what's available on our project in terms of materials and resources, and we look to offer it to them. You know, on Harapaki, there was culverts, a lot of waterproof tons of waterproof tarps, Novacalls, which are water pipes, etc. All got passed down, IBCs as well, containers, got passed down to the farming community through those conversations, and all got distributed and used through the community. But, you know, beyond that, at Harapaki, obviously, we had the weather events and Cyclone Gabriel, and that's when the connection became absolutely key. Because we were personally connected, we had numbers, locations, addresses. So, you know, not only did we help to recover SH5 after Cyclone Gabriel, but we were also into the communities providing valuable resources, food, fuel, clean water, medical resources, and ultimately saving lives because we were part of the community. It was our community.
Thanks for that, Lloyd. And obviously you're getting the feedback from the community as well. You're hearing back from them.
Yeah, completely, because you're connected, you know, you're part and parcel from a kid's perspective as well. So you get to know on a casual level if there's anything wrong, but also what's right, what people might need, and if there's anything that, you know, maybe there's too many trucks moving on a certain day, and you can, you know, you might not get something formal coming through, but you get to hear about that, and so you can make it right regardless.
Great to see some questions coming in there. So it means that the last 10 minutes aren't going to be dead air. Please keep them coming. If we can't get through them all, we will endeavour to answer them via email anyway. Tina, just coming to you, Meridian obviously isn't doing this on our own. How much do our suppliers, our contractors, our subcontractors and so on contribute to these results?
So I would say that the work that our suppliers do is hugely impactful on the projects, possibly making up a majority of impacts actually. And I guess the reason I say that is I think about just the quantum or the types of goods they supply, how they transport things to and around sites, right down to, I guess, they're also employing staff in the local area and abroad. So there's quite a wide range kind of behind each of them in terms of like that ripple effect that they can have. So I think we've been luckily in that all of our suppliers, as well as, I guess, Meridian, setting its own sustainability management plans for each of these projects, but each of our suppliers also do the same. And so these management plans, I guess, focus on, I guess, the project specific, like environmental or kind of social focus areas for the work. And it will include things like KPIs or the measures that we're going to track to kind of know if we're getting the outcomes we want. So I think, thankfully, you know, we've got some really good reporting from our suppliers across these projects, and it's taken some learning and a bit of a journey to get that up and running. But you know, we've got a really good sense of how we're tracking. We've, you know, typically got monthly reporting coming in. I think a really good initiative that we've kicked off is having supplier sustainability forums. So these are typically quarterly at a project level, and they've been really useful, just making sure that everyone has visibility of the impacts. We'll throw up, performance against targets, so everyone can see, I guess, the aggregated impact of the contribution that each of us are making, of which, you know, a really significant proportion of that is coming from our suppliers. And it's also, I guess, a forum where there's a chance for really good, honest conversations about lessons learned and kind of sharing successes and things like that. So I think kind of bottom line is that, we just wouldn't have had like the successes or learnings that we had without our suppliers kind of being totally on board and making those contributions. So they're big.
Well, Lloyd, we're going to be moving into questions shortly. Before we do, though, are you seeing a change in attitudes across industry, a willingness to take on this type of work, or is it still something unusual that you need to specifically include in contracts?
A massive change, absolutely massive change. I've been working in this space 22 years now, and the first 10 to 15 years I was bashing my head against a brick wall, to be perfectly honest. It was, you know, hard graft and trying to make things happen and make things change and get things implemented. Good 8 or so years ago, you saw a significant shift. And since then, it's just been on a quick upward trajectory. And every year it's getting more and more business as usual. And that's great to see. Just last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, we trialed EV plant and machinery on one of our sites, and just to see that, I mean, a couple of years ago, I'd never thought I'd see that for years, if ever, and to see it actually on site in front of me, these two big pieces of plant, an excavator and a front loader, moving around completely silent or almost silent, digging things up just as you would anything else, and just seeing how practical they were and how good for the operators. It was great to see. But saying that, contracts and getting contracts correct are essential. That's been one of our key learnings across the board. You've got to get your contract right. You've got to get the details into your contract and get it at that early stage and get that expectation correct. That's how you lead into the project. That's part of project management requirement. But yeah, you've got to get that contract right.
Just finally, I really want to labour on this point, that the importance of people, Lloyd. Would we be achieving everything that has been achieved if you didn't have the right people with the right attitudes in place to drive and deliver this work?
It's all about the people, Lachlan. It's that's what it is, not just in terms of having the right people, but in terms of the local community, the wider community, and all Kiwis really. That's what we're doing this for. So yeah, it's absolutely all about the people, and that's what you realise, when you come towards the end of the projects and you look back at all the various bits and pieces you've done. At the end, it comes down to, yes, it starts with maybe the individuals and specialists, then your project team, then your wider team, your contractor team, and then feeds into the communities. In Harapaki, we had 2,500 people inducted. That's a really significant number. And then we've got thousands of people in the local community and 75,000 people in Hawke's Bay that were probably notably affected by Harapaki. So yeah, it's really about the people.
Lovely, thank you for that. Okay, we're going to take a few of the questions now. We're starting to see a few of them come in. I'm going to start with a question for Michael. I'm going to direct this to you there, Lloyd, and it's hang on, just had another one come in and I lost that question. Keen to know what you're doing on biodiversity, nature positive. Are you moving away from mitigation and towards leaving a net positive legacy at your sites or in and around those assets?
Yeah, it's obviously a key factor of sustainability, and we have a personal commitment to leave a site at least in the same state that we started after construction, but we ideally like to increase the biodiversity of that site, and we are looking at a number of measures to do that in terms of additional conservation areas, fencing off, wetland offsetting beyond just what the consent requires. So again, for instance, at Harapaki, we did a wetland offset as part of the consent process, but we actually made it twice the size of what the consent required, just to push it to the next level. And that's the kind of thing that we're looking for again. So at Ruakaka Solar, where again we have wetlands, we're looking at a really significant wetland development there that is well beyond what's going to be offset.
I'm going to stick with you, Lloyd, because we've got another question from Nick around Harapaki, which was the baseline for Harapaki carbon savings. How was it achieved? What percentage of the total was it? And did you have an assurance process throughout that?
The assurance processes was light compared to what you might see now, because you've got to bear in mind that projects are planned and designed years in advance, and then you kind of set in stone through your contracts and your management systems. So Harapaki was designed in 2018, so before I was actually with Meridian or Tina. So you've got to work with what was done at that time. But what we did do when I came on board with myself and our carbon experts is we did a prediction of what we thought Harapaki would emit, and then we looked at what we can reduce. But the main thing we've done is look at the actions that are taken on the ground, because we didn't have a good baseline to work from. What we did was we'd taken the individual actions and looked at what value that would have had from a carbon perspective, and then looked at the value that we've managed to end up with.
Lovely, thank you for that. Tina, I'm going to ask you to put a bit of a financial hat on. We'll see how we go with this one. This is a question from Michael. Whether, from a return on investment perspective, have the introduced sustainability initiatives worked to drive an improved level of financial performance for Meridian and its shareholders?
Yeah, well, I think Lloyd and the team have done a really good job at also quantifying the financial savings from some of these initiatives. So I think there was an example, like for example, with the pond that they sort of built actually on the Harapaki wind farm, and that avoided like a number of truck movements of water to and from site, and that's really important because they want to do things like dust suppression and whatnot. And I think that was in the order of millions of dollars of avoided diesel fuel consumption as well as the carbon avoided as well. So they've been able to aggregate up, I guess, the avoided consumption of goods and services from sort of implementing these initiatives. So I think that's a big part of the story, is like sustainability doesn't need to cost more. Actually, if it results in a more efficient use of resources, then there are definitely financial gains to be had. And it's a really important part to kind of capture the measure of, because a lot of people kind of really understand that language. So definite financial wins.
I'm going to stick with you, Tina, because this is a good question from Gavin. It's around how our sustainability goals are applied to projects at our existing facilities. So where there may be fewer options versus greenfield sites, both in terms of generation and the facilities there. Are you able to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because often, the biggest sustainability wins do come when you're sort of working at the design side of things versus once, a facility is up and running. But, we've got a lot of, maintenance activities on site and things like that also kind of take up time. So, there's things going on in our business now where we're thinking about how do we, for example, have a more efficient boat sort of down in Matapori. So we've got a ferry down there which is taking staff to and from the Matapori power station. So we're looking at the opportunity to sort of electrify that. So that's one practical example. And I guess when we're looking at any sort of maintenance works, we're trying to think about, the goods that we're consuming on site, and, what are like lower carbon alternatives. As upgrades happen, some of the team have done some really cool things looking at like hydraulic hoses and how do we, avoid things like those going to landfills and, maximize recycling and things like that. So there's a lot of, really tangible, interesting things happening across our kind of existing assets. But yeah, wherever there's the opportunity to get in at that early stage in the design side of things, that is where you kind of get the biggest wins, but there's always opportunity there. So
I reckon we can squeeze in two more, and I'm going to come to you for this one, Lloyd, just to give Tina a bit of a break there. This question from Michael, and it's around what are the main drivers that you use to get EV plant and machinery on site among other sustainability initiatives? Was it contractual requirements, or did you use performance standards to give the construction team that flexibility?
The ultimate milestone is having a charging option. So, they've got to be able to charge the EV. So you've got to, and during construction, so you've got to have somewhere that they can plug into. And that was a notable issue at Harapaki because we just didn't plan for that, although there wasn't so much available there. What we do now is we keep an EV plant and machinery register, and we keep that up to date every other month. So we're very aware that there's a lot of EV plant and machinery available, and so that's out there. It's about getting it used. So what we do now is we do what we call early electrification on our projects. That's where we provide a number of points within the construction project that are electrified from day dot when you start construction, and there we can charge up our EV plant and machinery, or a battery that will charge them, or whatever it might be. Obviously there is then a contractual and management planning perspective that you need to go through, and you need to work with your contractors. But yeah, the first step is making sure that you've got somewhere where they can charge, and that sounds easy, but it's really not. You've got a number of connection issues and voltage, loading, etc. It's quite a challenge to put that in place at such an early stage where you don't have the infrastructure.
Thanks, Lloyd. Tina, I think we've got time to get one more question to you. And look, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, Gisa. Gisa is asking, implementing sustainable practices can become challenging as the scale and budget of a project changes. How does Meridian ensure the application of that policy at all levels of the organisation?
So I guess Lloyd touched on the sustainable infrastructure framework that we've developed in the past. And so we set that up a few years ago, and that was an intent to translate, I guess, our big sustainability goals down to like, what does it mean at a project level? And I think a big part of that is thinking about a materiality assessment. So we do that for all of our projects. And I guess the purpose of that is that you can't take on the world. There are thousands and thousands of things you could do. And so, we're really trying to think about what are the most material things that we really need to to focus on and get right to sort of have kind of the biggest bang for buck in our efforts, because there are limited resources and time and things like that. So that would be a process that we go through to make sure that we're thinking about what are going to be the most important, impactful things we can do, noting that we do have to operate within some constraints. So
nicely timed there, Tina, because I think it's about time to wrap us up at 12:30. A big thank you to Tina, Meridian's Head of Sustainability, and Lloyd, Meridian's Environmental and Sustainability Design Manager, for sharing your time, your expertise, your insights. Thanks to everyone who joined us online for the second of these Tackling Zero webinars. We'll be back in a few months with a new guest and a new topic. If you have further questions or ideas of what you'd like to see next as another topic, please drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. You can email us at corporatecomms@meridianenergy.co.nz. Thank you again to everyone who's taken the time to join us today. We'll see you next time. Ka kite anō.